Welcome to today's episode of the Deep Dive Credit Podcast, presented by Elite Credit Solutions. We are your trusted partner in affordable credit repair, proudly based in Tampa, Florida, and dedicated to serving clients across the entire United States. Join us as we explore the intricacies of credit management, share expert insights, and empower you with the knowledge you need to achieve your financial goals. Get ready for an enlightening journey into the world of credit. Let's dive in.
Let's get started. Overdraft fees. That's what we're diving deep into today.
Definitely a hot topic.
For sure. And we got some great material to dig into. A CBS News article and a press release straight from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
The CFPB, yeah.
That's right, the CFPB.
Yeah.
So really what we're trying to do today is get a handle on this new rule they've put out about how banks are going to be handling overdrafts.
Big changes could be coming.
Absolutely. Could have a big impact on folks' wallets and, of course, the banking industry as well.
Well, and that's really what's fascinating about this. This rule, while focusing on overdraft fees, really sort of gets at this broader question of how financial institutions balance serving their customers.
Right.
With making money.
Always that tension, right.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm kind of curious, like way back when, late 1960s, when this whole system was getting set up, what was the thinking behind overdraft fees? What was the point?
Back then it was all about paper checks.
Yeah.
Slow mail delivery and bounced checks were a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
So overdraft fees were kind of a safety net. You accidentally write a check for more than you've got. The bank covers it, saves you the hassle, the embarrassment.
Yeah.
Maybe some penalties from whoever you wrote the check to. And they charged a small fee for that service.
Makes sense in that context.
It was intended to be helpful.
Yeah, like a helping hand.
Exactly. But as we all know, things
changed.
Yeah.
So maybe just for anyone listening who's not totally up to speed, how do these overdraft fees work nowadays?
Okay, picture this. You've got, let's say, $50 in your checking account. You swing by, grab a coffee, $5.
Right.
Later that day, completely forget about your balance. You hit the grocery store, spend $60.
Yeah.
Boom, you're in overdraft territory. The bank, they'll cover that purchase, but then
Here comes the fee.
that fee, which could be as high as $35.
Ouch. And that's exactly where the CFPB is drawing the line with this new rule. They're saying, enough with these crazy fees.
Yeah, they're targeting banks with, over $10 billion in assets.
The big guys.
Right, and giving them 3 options for how to deal with overdrafts going forward.
Okay.
They can cap the fee at $5. They can charge a fee that actually reflects their cost for covering the overdraft.
Makes sense.
Or, and this is interesting, they can treat the overdraft like a small loan with, of course, clear disclosure of the interest rate.
That last one, framing it as a loan, that feels different.
It is. It's like they're saying, hey, if you're going to charge a hefty fee, be upfront about it. This is a loan.
Yeah.
The CFPB director actually called this closing a legal loophole
Oh, wow.
and cracking down on excessive junk fees.
Strong words.
Oh.
Sounds like they're really pushing for transparency.
Definitely. And they estimate this rule could save consumers a whopping $5 billion every year.
Seriously.
Yeah, which breaks down to about $225 for each household that usually pays these fees.
That's not chump change, especially for folks who are struggling to make ends meet. So let's talk about the reaction to this rule. What are the folks who are in favor of it? What are they saying?
Groups like the USPRG and the National Economic Council, they're calling this a win for consumers.
Okay.
They're saying it promotes fairness, prevents banks from making huge profits off of, people's financial mistakes,
Yeah.
especially those who can least afford it.
Yeah.
And the CFPB itself, they're pointing to the $6 billion in annual savings consumers have already seen because of their crackdown on junk fees.
So they're saying this approach is working.
They say it's proof.
Okay. But what about the other side? What are the concerns from the folks who aren't so happy about this rule?
Well, the American Bankers Association, for example, they're arguing that these fees are already transparent.
Yes.
That this rule unfairly demonizes a normal banking practice.
Demonizes. Wow.
Yeah. Their worry is that limiting these fees could lead to banks offering fewer services, particularly for people who don't have a lot of banking options.
Interesting. So they're saying it could hurt the very people it's trying to help.
That's their point. They think lower-income customers who rely on overdraft protection could be left out in the cold if banks decide it's not profitable to offer those services.
That's a tough one. And the financial analysts seem to be backing up these worries.
Yeah.
The folks at TD Cowen, they're predicting legal challenges, pushback from lawmakers,
Oh, wow.
and a big hit to bank revenues, especially for those regional banks. Sounds like this rule is stirring up quite a storm.
It is, yeah. It really highlights how tricky it is for banks to balance taking care of their customers while still staying profitable.
Definitely. But before we jump into what this might mean for consumers and banks, let's backtrack a bit. The CFPB, they haven't just been making statements, they've been taking some action.
Right. They've been cracking down on what they see as illegal overdraft practices. In fact, they've recently gone after several big banks. Navy Federal, Wells Fargo, Regions Bank, Atlantic Union.
Big names.
Yep. And those actions have led to millions of dollars in refunds for consumers.
Wow. So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
They're not messing around. This isn't just talk. They're serious about reshaping the whole overdraft system.
So what's this all mean for the average person? What should our listeners be paying attention to as this all plays out?
Well,
Well, that's a big question, right? We've talked about the history of these fees, the new rule, all the back and forth. But what does it actually mean for, well, you, our listeners?
yeah. For a lot of folks, this rule could mean some real relief.
That's what we like to hear.
Think about it. $225 back in your pocket every year.
Yeah.
If you're someone who usually gets hit with those fees,
Mm-hmm.
that's real money. Groceries, gas, unexpected bills.
It could make a difference. But you did mention there could be some downsides to this rule, too. What should people be watching out for?
Yeah, that's the thing. One worry is that banks, especially those regional banks,
Okay.
the ones that rely more on overdraft fee income,
Mm-hmm.
they might start tightening up their lending, become more cautious.
How so?
Well, it could be harder to get a loan, if you have a lower credit score.
Oh, I see.
Or if your income is, not super steady,
Mm-hmm.
or even just to get a basic checking account.
So the rule is meant to protect consumers, but it could end up making it harder for some people to get the financial services they need.
Yeah, that's the concern. And it's a valid one. Makes you wonder, what other options are there for folks if they can't get those traditional banking services?
That's a tough question. Trying to find that balance, right? Protecting people, but also making sure they have access to the tools they need.
It's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore the impact on the banks themselves. You mentioned those analysts at TD Cowen,
Yeah, they predicted a big hit to revenues.
especially for regional banks.
Right. So how do you see that playing out?
Well, it's possible banks might try to make up for that lost income by, raising fees on other things
Uh-huh.
or hiking interest rates on loans. Consumers need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. It's all connected. This overdraft rule isn't happening in isolation. The whole financial world is in flux.
It is, yeah. And this rule could really speed up some of those changes we're seeing.
So it sounds like we all need to be paying close attention. This isn't just about overdraft fees. It's about, the whole relationship between consumers, banks, and the government.
Right. It's getting more complicated all the time, especially with all the new technology and, people's financial needs are changing too.
This rule feels like it's forcing everyone to face some pretty fundamental questions.
Yeah, like, what are banks really supposed to be doing? What's
Yeah.
their responsibility to their customers?
Mm-hmm.
And is it ethical to make money off of people's financial struggles?
Yeah. And how do we build a system that's fair for everyone, but also, works in the long run? Big questions, not easy answers.
No, not at all. But these are conversations we need to be having.
Absolutely. And we need everyone at the table, right?
Yeah.
Consumers, policymakers, banks, community groups.
Everyone's got to be part of it.
This new rule from the CFPB might be about overdraft fees, but it really seems to be shining a light on some much bigger issues.
It is. It's showing us that we need to keep talking, keep working together to make sure our financial system works for everyone, not just a few.
So where do we go from here?
Oh.
The CFPB's set a date, October 2025.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've said, a lot can happen between now and then.
Oh, yeah. We could see lawsuits, pushback from Congress, more negotiations between the CFPB and the banks.
It's so much uncertainty.
It's going to be important to stay informed, stay involved.
What would you advise our listeners to do, with all this up in the air?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed.
Okay.
Pay attention to any updates, any changes to the rule. See how the banks are reacting, not just what they say publicly, but what they're actually doing. Are they changing their fees?
Mm-hmm.
Are they offering different kinds of accounts?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your money.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to speak up. Contact your elected officials, get involved with consumer groups, let your bank know what you think.
Good idea. This isn't just about banks and the government. It's about all of us. We're all part of this system.
We are. And this conversation needs to include everyone. We need to hear all sides and work together to create a financial world that's fair, transparent, accessible to everyone.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This has been a really fascinating look at overdraft fees, and even bigger than that, the role of banks in our society.
It has been, yeah. We've covered a lot of ground, the history, the arguments, the potential impacts. But now I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
You've talked about balancing the needs of consumers with, the reality that banks need to make money.
Yeah.
And this new rule, it seems like the CFPB is trying to shift that balance a bit.
Yeah, give consumers a little more power, maybe.
Exactly. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this whole situation, it really brings up a fundamental question.
Yeah.
Whose interest should our financial system really be serving? I mean, is it about making the most profit for banks and shareholders?
Right.
Or is it about making sure everyone has a fair shot? That they're financially secure, especially those who are struggling the most?
It's a tough question. Finding that middle ground where banks can stay in business, but people are also protected from, practices that take advantage of them.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, we really need to think about the unintended consequences, like who could actually benefit from this rule and who might end up worse off. Are there other ways to fix these problems? The financial instability, the lack of access to banking services.
Those are big questions. It's easy to get lost in the headlines, the back and forth between the CFPB and the banks.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's real people's lives that are being affected.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about overdraft fees. It's about creating a financial system that works for everybody.
Everyone having equal access, right?
Exactly. And about educating people about finances so they can make smart choices with their money.
This deep dive has really gotten me thinking about, who has the power in the financial system? It's such a complicated web, and it's easy to feel like you don't have any control as just one person.
Yeah, I get that. But you do have a voice. Stay informed. Talk about these issues with others. Let your elected officials know what you think. Talk to your bank.
Yeah, make yourself heard.
Collective action can actually make a difference.
That's right. We're not just along for the ride. We can shape the system to reflect what we believe in.
Couldn't agree more. I hope this deep dive has given you the tools and the knowledge to navigate the financial world, as complicated as it is.
It's definitely been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of overdraft fees, and more importantly, into these bigger questions about the role of financial institutions in our society.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned something and that it's gotten you thinking. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
Another insightful episode of the Deep Dive Credit Podcast, brought to you by Elite Credit Solutions, your go-to resource for affordable credit repair across the United States. We appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you found the information valuable and empowering. If you're ready to take control of your financial future, don't hesitate to reach out to us at 813-317-6776. Additionally, don't forget to like today's podcast, share with your friends on social media, follow us, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in tune with future updates. Thank you for listening. And until next time, keep striving for excellence in your credit journey.